I wanted to read a letter that Baba sent Francis while he was working on the State of God. He wrote it mostly between 1956 and 1958. When he moved to India, Baba had him read it out several times. And Baba loved the book. And Baba really had a hands-on relation to it. He, corrected little things and changed things. Even little bits of wording here and there. And a place where you could find out about this, if you could only get the book, is Robert Rouse's book, The Water Carrier. But actually, before that, Rouse, R-O-U-S-E. He's one of the old-timers. He's like a Phyllis Hendrick, you might say. I mean, an old-timer at Avatar's, although he died last year. But before that, he wrote a little pamphlet called The Making Book, which is also out of print. But his daughter is thinking of reprinting it, and I urged her to reprint the pamphlet as an appendix to it. And it gives a lot of information about specific what Baba's involved in it. Baba actually dictated 3 messages for this book, and I won't take the time to pull them up here, but if you have books, on page 13 there's this message. I'll look at it in a minute. Out of that nothing mine came, out of mine came this everything, and so forth. That was, I think, some of it at least compiled by Baba for the book. On page 65, right before book 3, is one of the most significant messages Baba ever gave on his word. And it's a page and a half, and I've never seen it anywhere else. And the very last page of Stay With God, the last page with anything on it, is called Dreaming and Dreaming by Meher Baba. So these are all messages that Baba gave specifically for this book. While Francis was working on Stay With God, he sent Baba a letter. He hadn't started writing the poetry yet, but he told Baba that in preparation for this work, in the course of compiling his notes, he wanted to complete a study of the great scriptures of the world. So Baba, in reply, gave this message on scriptures, which is a classic, as you will see. Okay. Baba said, "The scriptures are like rotten bones rotted, and are as food for worms. Theosophy and philosophy are like good bones rotted, and are as food for vultures."
Hear, hear.
Writings of inspired poets are like fresh bones, and are as food for dogs. The writings of spiritually advanced saints are like flesh, and are as food for tigers. The writings by living perfect masters are like pain, and are as food for men. It's kind of a shocking message, but Francis was the guy who could get this, right? Good bones, when rotted, have some semblance of bone. Remember, good bones are theosophy and philosophy. But rotten bones, when rotted, are like filth. So, you may go through the scriptures superficially, only to drive away the barking dogs when necessary. For instance, when you are called upon to answer the queries of the priests and the orthodox. Put all your heart in the notes of Stay With God, which will turn out to be ever fresh rain. Baba knew his man. I mean, a lot of people would be shocked by getting something like this, but not Francis. He was like a tough guy.
Is that in here somewhere?
No, I don't remember where I got it. I saw it years ago, and then one of these listservs, I saw it and I grabbed it.
I've never eaten green.
Yeah, well, you just read Stay With God, and you'll... I know, it's a bit of a shocker. But when rereading this, as I was preparing for the Marana 9 days, we did 9 days on the Stay With God, actually, and it struck me that this was probably taken by Francis as a real directive from Baba on how he should stay with God. Because in the last section of it, if you read it, you might note there's very little. Francis talks about all kinds of great artists, great saints, and great cultural, Confucius, and Shankara, people, Rumi, people at Milarepa. But he has very little to say about the scriptures of the world. And one might have expected that to be at the center of the book, since he's doing this cross-cultural critique. Well, if they're just rotted bones, rotted in earth, food for worms, I think he probably took the hint not to. So you really won't see much at all. I don't find a single reference to the Koran. The Bible gets faintly alluded to with the lilies of the field image, that kind of thing. The sutras, some of the Mahayana sutras, one of them gets referenced, but basically not at all. So part of the character of Stay with God is it's not theological. It could have been, but it's definitely not. So now, here's a glance at the book and its parts. Let's see if I have it here. Yeah. Okay. These are the 5 books of Stay with God. Let's see if I can expand without losing too much. Well, you can see, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so there are 5 books to the main text. Meher Baba, The Occurrence of Reality and Illusion. You might note mentally, biography. This is Meher Baba's biography through 1955, which he characterizes as the occurrence of reality and illusion. That's what the life of the avatar is. That makes sense. Book 2, The Love Song of John Carey. Now, John Carey is the sobriquet that Francis uses to designate himself. It's very thinly veiled. He's obviously talking about himself. He puts himself into the poem in this way. Book 3, Illusion Singing to Reality. Book 3, God's Speaking. You may note a resemblance to the Meher Baba's book, God Speaks, right? That was published. In the very month that Baba gave Francis the order to write this book. It was published in November of 1955, and that month Baba told him to write Stay with God. The question which reality asked itself, and the beginning of illusion, and its end. And what do you suppose the question which reality asked itself might be? Who am I? Right. So it's the divine theme narrative. Book 4, The Steps to His Feet. Abandoning illusion for reality. Every stanza, there are 5-line stanzas. Every stanza here ends with the phrase, the perfect master, the perfect master, the perfect master. So here he's asking, the question is, steps to his feet. How do you get to the feet of a perfect master? That's what that book is about. And this is more than half of the entire poem, Book 5. The God-man as world axis and living perfection of art. As I was saying this morning, art is very central to what Stay with God is about. And he doesn't have a small idea of art as something which is reserved to people who consider themselves to be artists. He's talking about the remolding of the stuff of creation in the likeness of divinity. So the avatar himself is the highest of all art. Just the living incarnation of the avatar. He approaches it that way. And world axis, as we'll see, you know the word kutub? The word kutub, Q-U-T-U-B. It's the Arabic word, which Meher Baba selected. Well, in Islam, they don't have the idea of a God-man or man-God. The idea of, man becoming God or God becoming man is heretical in Orthodox Islam. But the kutub is understood as somehow the pivot. It's a human being, a human who is the pivot of the universe. And they have an idea that really does approach what we understand to be the perfect master or avatar. Not far from that. But it's the axis around which the entire universe revolves, or a pole, right? A pole that rises, the vertical axis. So that theme of the vertical axis, I want to just mark it now. It's a big theme in Stay With God. Francis is developing his theme with a number of motifs that recur throughout the whole book. So watch for them when you read it, and how he uses them and transforms them as he goes along. This is a big one. The vertical axis, living perfection of art. The divine sun of reality, shining through the mists of illusion. Okay, now these 5 books, here's my own understanding of it, so this is interpretive. Right? For Stay With God was written, or the order was given by Baba, almost immediately after Baba had publicly declared himself to be the avatar. He did so the year before, in 1954, February. And this was, I think the first intimate sahabas with lovers after that time, in Mehrabad, 1956. And I take Stay With God to be an epic presentation of Meher Baba as the avatar to the world. And it's, as such, it's quite spectacular in its conception and execution. As I say, I would be very surprised if anything like it was written for a long time, centuries maybe. And looks to me like this. Books 1 to 3 present who Meher Baba is. Books 4 to 5 are dealing with what do we do about that? How do we respond to that fact? Because actually, the title that Baba gave him, the order that Baba gave to Francis, was Stay With God. And that's an imperative verb. It's taken by Francis as addressed to all humanity. Stay with God. For a long time, God has been like a 4-letter word in many artistic circles. Certainly in Francis's world it was. So it wasn't a title that was going to be popular with the set that he had grown up with. But he was completely fearless about developing that theme. So the first 3 books, if you're going to stay with God, well, who is he to begin with? Who is the avatar? And it seems to me, I think this is a very simple, the conception of the book is simple, but profound and brilliant, I feel, as a presentation of Baba. The first one is, well, who is he? Well, it's God descending in human form and living the life of a man on earth. So what is that story? Well, he tells the story. It's a narrative. It's a biographical narrative. And he does it in epic style, as we'll be looking into it. Specifically, he situates it within the epic tradition, especially of Western literature, but epic exists internationally too. Book 2, so this is, the life of the God-man. We could, for comparisons, the Ramayana, right? The story of Ram. The Vishnu Purana, or the Bhagavata Purana, or the Mahabharata, where you hear the life of Krishna, or the Gospels, or Ashwagosha's Buddha Karika, I think is the name of the life of Buddha, composed by one of the great Sanskrit poets. He clearly is consciously undertaking this same literary task of presenting the avatar in this way, or within that great context of the life story of the God-man. Book 2 is completely different aspect of Meher Baba that's coming out. Now Meher Baba is being presented as the beloved, the lover, right? So for, this is the most I don't know if any of you from the previous years would remember these words, Sagun and Nirgun. Anybody remember these words? Or know these words? What's that? Sagun these are terms Baba uses in Infinite Intelligence of God System, here Vedante. Sagun means sa is with, and gun means attribute. God with attributes. And nirgun is God without attributes. You might say these are the two basic aspects of God. Or sakar and nirakar would be, sakar is God with form, and nirakar is God without form. So God with attributes and with form, the avatar, the personification of God is that. He has attributes, he has a face, he has a form, he's funny, he's angry, he's sad, he's happy. You know, Baba would show all these things. These are all human attributes and forms we can see. God without form and without attributes, Nirgun and Nirakar, is that oceanic God who we can't see. You can't see him. Who can see that God? Only on the sixth plane can you see that God. But this is a very real side of God too. Okay, well, in book 2, it's the Sagun aspect. God as the personal beloved, whom I, the lover, adore. And Francis speaks, he puts this John Kerry in, who's a token for himself. And he introduces the personal voice of love and adoration for Meher Baba as the divine beloved. So you can see how this is actually presenting who Baba is, right? A big part of who Meher Baba is the beloved. Baba wants us to love him. That puts him in this role, lover-beloved access. So book 2 presents him this way, and it's brilliantly done. So it's within the love, also within the love song genre. This would be, do you know the word genre? What is a genre?
The division, like mysteries, Western.
Yeah, a category of literature or of art. A mystery, from a novel to the mystery novel, or a romance novel, or a soap opera on TV, or a news story, or a sports show, or a sitcom, a sonnet, like this. These would be different literary genres. So the book 1 is really within epic narrative, epic biographical narrative. Book 2 is within the love song genre. Now you all know love songs, right? They're on the radio all the time. Begin the Beguine would be a masterful love song. There's so many of them. So he's actually working within the conventions of the love song genre to present Meher Baba in this aspect of who he is, the most personal aspect as the one whom I adore. Okay? Book 3 goes to the complete opposite. It presents, who is Meher Baba? He's this entire kit and caboodle. He is this entire universe. He is the creator of the universe, the sustainer of the universe, the dissolver of the universe, and he is every soul within the universe. He is the totality. Every part. There's no one other than him, right? This is the God Speaks story. The Advaitic story that I am God. And the story of the entire universe is nothing but the story of God coming to God. And that God is Meher Baba, right? So he's gone from the most personal aspect of who Meher Baba is to the most universal and impersonal aspect of who Meher Baba is, right? You follow this thought? So look at this conception he's given us. He's saying, who is Meher Baba? In 3 sections he's shown man living on earth at a certain historical period. He is the beloved of all lovers, and he is universal God who alone exists. Right? Now, it's actually quite a simple conception. It's actually deeply penetrating and powerful and encompasses. So if you're going to stay with God, well, here is who he is. So these first 2 books are doing that. And what book 3 does, we'll look at that tomorrow afternoon, it's a poetic retelling of the divine theme narrative. Do you know what the divine theme is? Meher Baba's divine theme? I think you probably do.
story of evolution and involution.
Right. The journey of the soul from creation, evolution, reincarnation, evolution, realization of God. It's Meher Baba's central philosophical idea that he gave to the public, you might say. It's our story. It's the biography of us. So book 3, of course, the divine theme is right at the center of God Speaks. You know, it goes, as I understand God Speaks, goes through the divine theme 3 times. I think we had sessions here at Los Angeles on that, where he retells in different ways. Well, this section of Stay with God is actually goes through the divine theme 4 times plus 1. The plus 1 is a little coda. But it's not a philosophical telling the divine theme. It's a highly poetic, very beautiful retelling. It's theme and variations. That's the part. It's a musical form. Some of you who have studied classical music, and if we get a chance tomorrow, I'll play something by Mozart, which will illustrate theme and variation to show you what Francis is doing. As we were saying this morning, Francis was very well educated, self-educated in music, in classical music. So this is what he's doing in this whole part of the book. This is who Meher Baba is. Books 4 and 5 are quite different, because Baba's order was not tell to the world who I am. No, his order was write a book entitled Stay with God. Okay? Well, this is who God is. Now, book 4 is the steps to his feet. Okay, this is who he is. What do we do about it, right? Well, the first thing is to get to him. We have to get to the feet of the perfect master. And this book is really addressed to genuine seekers, I would say. Genuine seekers of God. And then the last book is really addressed to all humanity. And it's about how culture should be anchored in the reality of God. And in the course of it, how it has drifted away from that over recent centuries and millennia. What's happened where civilization has gone wrong, and how we reach through it and anchor it, and how we stay with God. Right? So this is how I understand the conception of the whole work. It's actually quite... Are you following this? It's actually a simple idea, but the greatest ideas are often at their core very simple and very powerful and deeply rooted.
Question.
Yeah.
How did you figure all this out? Was it like God or something that you see real, or you look at things a certain way that the rest of us, because I've seen how we look at God's speaks.
Right.
How did you figure this out?
Well, this is my field of study, I was a professor of literature, and part of the job is to understand the structure of it. And also I read it 30 times in the last year, so that helps.
Because I can see understanding structure, but not necessarily getting meaning of it.
Right. And I really studied Francis, because Francis was deeply conscious of what he was doing. I mean, he had been given an assignment by his beloved master, who was the avatar of the age. And he was trying to create something. I don't know, to do this you need a lot of chutzpah, frankly. And he was trying to do something that would hold the stage with Homer and Mahabharata. He's quite conscious of, you will see it when you look at the opening lines. So he had really thought it out. Now I'm just explaining what I see about this. You don't have to accept this, of course. But I think, to me, it seems quite clear. Now, some of the, we won't look very much at the front matter. I'm going to look at 1 or 2 items, though. I don't know if you know what the front matter of a book means, but it's the material before the book proper really begins. And Francis begins Stay with God with a sonnet. It's a dedication. This on the left is just recent, or biography of him that he put in recently, but a dedicatory. He composed this as an Italian sonnet, is the name of the form. And we'll look at it presently, but this is the last page of the whole book, the last page of the poem. And he closes it with another Italian sonnet. Now, a sonnet is probably the most famous lyric form in Western poetry. Of course, some of the most famous sonnets in English are by Shakespeare. He wrote 150 of them or so. They're some of the greatest sonnets ever written. But the format actually originated in Italy. The great sonneteer, there are a bunch of them. Dante wrote them, but Petrarch was the name of the Italian poet most associated with the pioneering of the sonnet form. And I'd like to take a second and look at one of these, a traditional sonnet, to give you an idea of what it is like. This is in the Italian. I chose Milton because Shakespeare's sonnet form is slightly different. It's a 14-line poem, and the Italian sonnet has a 4-line quatrain, a 4-line quatrain, and then what's called a sestet, 6 lines to end it. And the rhyme scheme is this. You'll see what it is. Spent, wide, hide, bent, present, chide, denied, prevent. That is A, B, E, A, B, B, A, right? And then these are sometimes variable, but here it's need, best, state, speed, rest, wait. This is actually C, D, E, C, D, E. And sometimes it will be C, D, E, E, D, C. There can be some variations. So there's an opening 8 lines linked by rhyme, and the closing 6 lines linked by rhyme. And the poetic, this is the rhyming scheme. And there's also a poetic meter. Do you know what a poetic meter is? Rhythm, yeah. It's a regular rhythmic form with syllable count and stress. Actually, any song you listen to, it doesn't have a meter, but the same function is performed by the music with a rhythmic structure. But in a meter, the words themselves carry a rhythmic form. And this meter is called iambic pentameter. Have any of you been clubbed over your heads in school by the iambic pentameter? An iamb is short, long, or unstressed, stressed, but da. And pentameter means 5 measures. So Lois, you've had the iambic pentameter. So da-da, da-da, da-da. Huh? I know, the last thing you know, remember from literary schooling before you die, is iambic pentameter. Iambic pentameter. So it's 10 syllables or 11. So I'll read this out just to give you. Now Milton's poetry is very unique. These long sentences. I'll try to count the beats if I can. When I consider how my light, he was blind, by the way, and he's writing about his blindness and he's complaining about it. And it's very famous sonnet. When I consider how my light is spent, they are half my days in this dark world and wide, and that one talent which is deaf to hide lodged with me useless, though my soul more bent to serve therewith my Maker, and present my true account, lest he returning chide, doth God exact day labor, light denied? I fondly ask. With patience to prevent that murmur, soon replies, God doth not need either man's work or his own gifts. Who best bear his mild yoke, they serve him best. His state is kingly, Thousands at his bidding speed, and post or land and ocean without rest. They also serve, who only stand and wait. This last line in particular, I remember Kitty, which I know it can be a bit hard to understand Milton's language, but he's sort of saying, how can I serve you if I'm blind, you know? And God answers, well, God has servants all over the place. When he wants something done, he has servants who will speed over the entire earth to perform his bidding. But those who just stand and wait on his word, they're serving him too. It's a beautiful poem, a beautiful poem. But this is to give you an idea of what a sonnet is. Okay, we could spend a long time just on this to unpack the grammar, which is rather intricate. Well, Francis begins Stay with God with a sonnet, which is here. It's not always in perfect iambic pentameter, but you can see the rhyme scheme. Friend, book, took, end. Send, look, forsaken, that's how it's being end. Story, tell, labor. Savor, well, glory. Like well and tell rhymes, story and glory. Right. So there's an opening 2 quatrains, an octave, and there's a closing step, the Italian sonnet form. To Meher Baba, my Lord and friend of worlds, here is the book on the theme you set me, and which I took into my heart and pondered to the end, that your dear name be known to men, and send perhaps one to your feet. Look indulgently on it, or else forsaken am I. Yet, Lord, correct my wit, and mend my heart in love, for love is my story. And in this book have I labored to tell something of your most marvelous labor. When of myself I wrote, not of your savor was in it. When I wrote of love, I wrote well, even showing forth some fraction of your glory. So, great Renaissance poems, and particularly literature and art in the age of patronage, would open with a dedication to the patron. So, of course, Baba's more than the patron. He's a pater with a capital P, yeah.
You think you have a lot of milk or silk? You got eyes to say.
You know, that could be. Yeah. I know it is. I do find it jarring to be out of the rhyme scheme otherwise. Maybe he began with that, and the tense made it into a forsaken. Yeah. So you can see here is the book on the theme you set me. What's he referring to?
Stay with God.
Stay with God. Baba told him to write a poem or a book on the theme Stay with God. It's an assignment. So he's saying, I've done what you told me to do. And now, the end of Stay with God, you'll see, echoes this very clearly. This is the last stanza of the coda of Book 5. This coda of Stay with God is very powerful and very moving. I hope on the last day we can read it and come to this from where the coda is. So there's been a whole long poem between the dedicatory and this. So have I read what love told me to write, and every line betrays my poverty of love. As a poor man asked his charity, displays but a single shilling to our sight. Yet I'm somewhat contented with my plight, in that rich love stooped down to ask of me, thus honoring me in whom no others see worth, myself the least. Thus does love with light and gentle grace encourage on his way the least of us, taking each by the hand he's labored with, using the same labor to raise him to still greater favor, even perhaps to love's own path, to stand in light and silence speaks with shining day. So So it's a beautiful ending to the whole poem. So this is a 14-line stanzaic form, as we see. We'll see book 4, the stanzas are 14 lines in length. By the way, Francis Brabazon, after this time, in the 1960s, when he was living with Baba, was the one who pioneered the English ghazal, started writing English language ghazals for Baba. And the form which Francis used, the ghazals are in couplets. He made them rhyming couplets. In Persian and Urdu, there's a different rhyming form because the language is different. And he would have 7 couplets, so those 2 would be 14 lines. So this 14-line form was much used by Francis. So it comes up here, both at the beginning and ending of the whole thing. Now, there's another aspect to Stay With God that I want to draw your attention to here. This is looking at the overall form of it. Francis gave a lot of attention to the formal structure and actually to numbers and symmetry. Many great artists have done this. Any of you, if you ever study Dante, you'll find out that his architecture, since whether God did so or not, Dante created a very intricate structure for hell and paradise and purgatory, where everything's divided down to this number of circles, and number within each circle of Borgias, and the number of cantos. I think he has 100 cantos in his total poem. I mean, it's intricate design. Johann Sebastian Bach would do this too. He would work out very intricately exact number of measures in a composition, and the golden mean within a composition had a certain place. There are many artists who paid a lot of attention to this. Well, Francis did too. And this is out of the 5 books, some of the architecture that, and part of it is I just did this because I went and counted and came up with this table. And you might say, well, who cares? Well, actually, when you're reading something like this, I'm very conscious of the fact that there is a feeling you get. Like, if a stanza is of a certain length, there's a certain rhythm and momentum when you're getting toward the end of it. You can really feel, even if you're not conscious of it. And in the formal design of sections, like section 3 is divided into 4 parts, and each of them is 10 stanzas. Well, when you get past the 5th into the 6th, there's a feeling that happens. You're past a hinge point. There's a moving on. So the feeling of inevitability and movement is really supported by these things. I'm totally certain that this is so. And Francis was very conscious in his design. So let's look first at the number of lines in a stanza. In book 1, which is the epic biography, right? His stanzas have 7 lines. In book 2, which is the love song, it's 6 lines. I could actually say a lot about these numbers. I mean, 6 is kind of an incomplete number in a way. 7 is more fulfilled and more satisfying. And the 6 is because the state of the lover is incomplete. Like this is playing. You're never satisfied. You never get that final cap on the whole thing. Book 3 is 10-line stanzas. And actually, there is the 10 states of God, God's speech. And there are 10 of these 10-line stanzas in each part. I'll get to that in a minute. So 7, 6, 10. Book 4 is the shortest stanza in the whole thing. There are 5-line stanzas. Every stanza ends with the phrase, the perfect master. It's like a ghazal. I forgot, does anybody remember what you call when the poet puts his name in the final couplet? Hafiz says, or says, is a tukula, I forgot. But it makes me think of that. It's like, that section is like hammers. Boom, 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 perfect measure, perfect measure, perfect measure. And it's a short stanza to accentuate that effect. Drive it home. He's hammering and driving it home. You've got to get to the feet of the perfect master. Right? short stanzas. And the last one has by far the most expansive stanzaic form, 14-line stanzas. And we read the very last stanza in the whole thing, which is a sonnet form. So this is the most expansive stanza form in the whole thing. Okay, so 7 lines, 6 lines, 10 lines, 5 lines, and 14 lines. Now, within this, there are formal divisions into sections. And when I mean formal divisions, I mean I'm not just being subjective. Like in book 1, there's a line in the middle of the page. You can look through and see them. In other words, end of the section. So I'm counting that way. So this first epic biography is divided into 7 sections. Book 2, do you know what a coda is? By the way, a coda?
Can you go back to the previously stated?
It's kind of it's the very last part of a composition, the very end of it. And literally, it means the tail, like a dog's tail. So like Bach would use a coda, you have the and it does do that. It ends it, but it recapitulates material from the entire thing that preceded. Kind of brings it into a miniature form that ends it. So it's the ending part of it's a musical form, a musical term. Well, every section actually has a coda. Francis uses that in all 5 books. So I didn't put it in here, but there actually is a coda to book 2, which is in just one part, and it has 24 stanzas. Book 3 goes through the divine theme 4 times plus 1. So 4 plus coda. And each of the 4 passes through it has 10 stanzas. And each of the stanzas has 10 lines. So we have 4 100-line passes, where it passes through the divine theme. What I mean is he tells the story of the divine theme, from creation to God realization. And then in the coda, he relates that story one more time, in brief. Okay? So you can see, I don't know, these formal patterns. In book 4, there are 40 stanzas. Actually, here there are 40 stanzas. Book 3, there are 40 stanzas too, right? 4 times 10. Book 4 is just one single section, but it's a 40 stanza section plus a coda. And book 5 has 4 parts, and each of them has 40 stanzas. So you see the use of the number 40 here. By the way, there's a poem, I don't know if any of you are acquainted with it, Meher Chalisa. Did you ever hear of Meher Chalisa? By Keshav Nigam. And it's, Chalisa means 40. It's a standard form in Hindu devotional literature, Chalisa. And of course, yeah.
When a poet is writing, does he plan all these things? Does he write in
I think that, I think that they happen concurrently, but clearly there was a conscious formal design in the front end. You know, when you've mastered your form enough, it's not like you have to impose it, like somebody like a Bach writing a fugue. Well, it just comes easily. Or Shakespeare writing a sonnet, you know. He just knows the form, it's second nature. But clearly this is... Yeah, at a certain point, you don't even have to think about it. You know where the rhyme is, you know what the meter is, and you know what the form is. Now, of course, Francis was creating this form. This whole form wasn't created for him. But he clearly did think it out. I mean, I'm just giving my opinion, but I don't think there's any doubt about that. It was deeply thought out. But this last one then has 4 parts. Each of them is 40 stanzas. And each stanza is 14 lines, the sonnet length, right? And then after that, here, this section 5 in book 1 is actually a coda, to tell the truth. Book 2 actually has a 2-line coda. I didn't put it in this chart. Book 3 does have a 1-stanza coda. Book 4 has a 1-stanza coda. And book 5 has a 5-stanza coda. So the use of the coda is there. Also, just more on the numbers, you know, I don't know, I hope you're seeing that there really are a number of patterns here that he's doing a lot. Here, this is a 24 stanza part, right? Well, actually, book 1, in its 7 sections, I mean, I don't have exactly a way of explaining, but these all seem like well thought out numbers. The opening section, this is book 1, which is quite long, right? I'm counting the number of stanzas in each of the 7 sections. The first one has 7 stanzas. The second one has 14. The third is by far the longest, 101. But I don't know, does that number ring a bell for anybody? 101 names of God, right? Then we have 16 and 16. Well, I don't exactly have any, 16 names of God to associate with it. But it seems like a significant number or a symmetrical number. Then the next one is 24, which is repeated here. Book 2 is 24 stanzas too. And it concludes with 5, like 5 perfect masters or all that sort of thing. So there's a very intricately worked out design.
I don't know if you ever have looked at, say, a model of the Parthenon, or the Taj Mahal, or these buildings. You're conscious of. I'm not a mathematician, but of a mathematical perfection, numbers and shapes and a coordination of all of them. And this really exhibits that to me. So he's really given a lot of thought to his dimensions and proportions, and that creates a sense of rhythm and expectancy when you're reading it. I mean, I can say for me, having read this poem so many times, it definitely does. I'm really aware where we are in a sequence and what point of movement we're at. So this is an important part of Stay With God too, and I'll be referring back to it from time to time. Let's see.